Zuri had always believed that love was something you built slowly, like a fire rising from small sticks to strong logs. For years she placed her patience, her kindness, and her silence into that fire, hoping it would warm the cold corners of Mandla's heart. But Mandla was not a man who loved warmth. He feared it. He feared anything he could not control. It began with small things. A plate not washed quickly enough. A greeting he claimed was too quiet. A visitor he said she welcomed too warmly. Zuri learned to shrink her voice, her dreams, even her steps, trying to disturb nothing around him. But the smaller she became, the angrier he grew, as if her gentleness accused him of something he refused to face. The villagers whispered, "Mandla was not like this before." They didn't understand that cruelty often grows most violently when a man fights the truth inside him. On the night everything changed, the sky was a deep, suffocating black. No stars, no moon, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. The wind pressed against the walls of their home, carrying a strange, electric heaviness. Zuri felt it in her bones, and she sensed the night was not ordinary. She was mending a torn cloth when Mandla stormed into the room, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He had been pacing outside for hours, muttering to himself, checking the shadows as if something stalked him. "Stand up," he snapped. Zuri rose slowly. "Is something wrong?" "Everything is wrong," he hissed, grabbing her arm. "You think I don't see it? The signs? The bad luck you bring into my house." Zuri's brows furrowed. "Mandla, Quiet." His shout hit her like a slap. "I should have listened before. I should have gotten rid of you long ago." Her heart stuttered. "Why are you saying this?" He didn't answer. Or perhaps he didn't know how to speak the twisted fear that had been rotting inside him. Instead, he dragged her toward the door. She stumbled, trying to keep her footing. "Mandla, please, what are you doing?" His fingers tightened. "You don't belong in my house. You never did." He flung the door open, and the cold wind burst inside like a warning. Zuri gasped as he pushed her onto the wet ground outside. The shock of the cold earth spread through her palms and knees. "Mandla, wait." "You didn't?" He threw one small bag after her, her clothes tossed carelessly like trash. Villagers peeked from their windows. Faces in the darkness. Eyes filled with pity, with fear, with the desire to close their shutters and pretend they saw nothing. Zuri lifted her head. "At least tell me why." Mandla's expression twisted. He looked at her not like a wife he once claimed to love, but like a prophecy he could not escape. "You were born with a shadow over you," he spat. "I thought marrying you would silence it, but it hasn't. Every night I feel it watching me. You bring something into this house, something cursed. I won't let it destroy me." Zuri felt her breath tremble, not from fear, but from confusion. "I've done nothing to hurt you." "That's the problem," he whispered, voice trembling. "You don't even need to. You are the danger." Before she could respond, he slammed the door shut. The sound echoed through the entire courtyard, through the sleeping village, through Zuri's chest. She stood there barefoot, the freezing wind clawing at her, her tears mixing with the wet soil. Her heart felt like it had been carved out and left to bleed on the ground. She tried to call his name again, but the word died in her throat. The silence around her was heavy, too heavy. Yet she didn't feel alone. The air shifted, wrapping around her like a cloak. The darkness blinked as if it had opened its eyes. Somewhere behind the trees, the wind whispered. Zuri wiped her face, shivering. "Is someone there?" The shadows didn't frighten her, because they felt strangely familiar. The night had watched everything. And for the first time in her life, Zuri felt the darkness wasn't here to harm her, but to hold her. Zuri walked into the night with nothing but the thin cloth around her shoulders and the echo of Mandla's final words lodged in her chest. The cold air stung her skin, but it was nothing compared to the ache inside her, a hollow, trembling ache that felt as if her ribs had cracked open to expose her heart. The village behind her remained quiet, pretending to sleep, pretending not to see. No door creaked open. No hand reached out. No voice whispered her name. It was easier to watch a woman fall than to risk standing beside her. But the night refused to abandon her. The wind changed direction, circling her like a protective beast. The trees swayed, not from the breeze, but as though bowing toward her path. Zuri felt the strangeness of it, but her mind was too heavy, too stunned to question anything. She walked until the village lights were nothing but fireflies fading behind her. When she reached the outskirts, the road grew darker, the bushes thicker. Somewhere far off, an owl called, a long mournful sound that echoed through her bones. Zuri swallowed hard, hugging herself as she moved deeper into the wild edges of the night. A sudden crack of thunder rolled across the sky, though no rain fell. Zuri stopped, glancing upward. Black clouds churned above her like restless spirits, glowing faintly inside as if lightning were trapped within them. "What is happening?" she whispered. She heard the whisper before she saw anything. Not a human voice. Not quite wind. Something in between. "You are not alone." Zuri spun around, heart pounding. "Who's there?" Only darkness, stretching endlessly. She continued walking, each step slower than the last. Her legs felt weak. Her eyes burned. Every memory of Mandla pressed against her. His rare smiles, now revealed as half-truths. His hands that once held hers, now the same hands that pushed her into the cold. Her breath shuddered as tears welled again. "What did I do to deserve this?" she whispered. The night answered again, the breeze swirling around her ankles. "You did nothing." Zuri froze. It wasn't an imagination. The voice was real, soft yet powerful, like 1,000 tiny echoes layered together. Before she could react, the wind swept around her again, this time warmer, gentler, guiding her toward the forest path instead of the empty road leading nowhere. Her feet moved without thinking, as if something unseen was carrying her. The trees thickened overhead, branches weaving together to shield her from the sky. Moonlight, which had been hidden before, broke through in thin silver lines, lighting her path beautifully, almost deliberately. Her heartbeat began to calm. Her breathing steadied. The fear that had gripped her chest began to loosen. She walked deeper until she reached a clearing she had never seen before. A pool of water glimmered at the center, smooth as glass, reflecting the swirling clouds above. The moment she stepped near it, the water rippled, not outward, but inward, like something beneath the surface had moved. Zuri stepped back, startled. Then the wind rose again, circling her ankles, her waist, her shoulders, like a pair of invisible arms lifting her chin. A whisper rose from the trees, from the grass, from the very soil beneath her feet. "The night witnessed what he did to you. The darkness saw your tears. You were thrown away, but you are not discarded." Zuri stood trembling. Why speak to me?" The water in the pool shimmered brighter, and mist began to rise from it, swirling upward until it formed shapes, figures made of shadow and moonlight. Zuri stumbled back, breath catching. She had heard stories as a child, about the night watchers, ancient beings who lived between darkness and dawn. Guardians of forgotten souls. Witnesses of hidden truths. But she never believed them. Now they stood before her. 3 figures. Tall, graceful, glowing faintly like embers inside smoke. The tallest one stepped closer. Its voice was soft but shook the air like distant thunder. "You were cast out by a man drowning in his own fear." Another voice joined, this one like the rustling of leaves in midnight wind. "But you are not weak." The third voice, gentle yet sharp, echoed. "You belong to the night more than he ever understood." Zuri felt tears roll down her cheeks again, but these were different. They were not from pain. They were from a strange, rising warmth in her chest, a flicker of strength she had forgotten she had. "Why me?" she whispered. The figures answered as one. "Because when he threw you into the darkness embraced you." Zuri inhaled shakily, feeling something shift inside her. A warmth spread through her palms, her chest, her throat. The night watchers moved closer, surrounding her in a circle. The tallest one reached out a hand of swirling shadow and touched her forehead. Instantly, Zuri felt a wave of energy rush through her, like lightning, like breath, like truth itself. Visions flashed behind her eyes. Manla pacing, terrified of a secret he was hiding. Zuri as a child, staring at the night sky with unexplainable comfort. A past she didn't yet understand. A future she couldn't imagine. The figures stepped back. "You were not thrown out," they whispered. "You were called." The wind calmed. The pool returned to stillness. The forest grew quiet. And for the first time since being cast into the cold, Zuri felt her spine straighten, her heart steady, her fear dissolve. The night had chosen her. And the night did not choose the weak. Zuri woke before dawn, sitting upright as though someone had pulled her from sleep with unseen hands. Her breath trembled, misting in the cold morning air. The clearing around her glowed faintly, the last embers of moonlight still clinging to the world before sunrise. For a moment she wondered if everything she'd seen was a dream. The night watchers. The pool of rippling shadows. The voices that spoke her name like a prophecy. But then she looked at her palms. They glimmered faintly, as though the darkness itself had left fingerprints of dim silver along her skin. Not a dream. Not madness. Not grief twisting her mind. Truth. Zuri stood slowly, her body still shaky but her spirit strangely anchored. The world felt different now. The forest seemed clearer, sharper. Even the silence had a pulse to it, as if the night was still speaking beneath the quiet. "Why me?" she murmured to the air. The wind answered, brushing softly against her cheek like a gentle hand. But another sound followed, one that made her freeze. Crying. Soft, distant, echoing through the trees. Zuri stiffened, heart pounding. She glanced around. It came again, the muffled sob of someone trying not to be heard. A child maybe. Or a woman. It was impossible to tell. Every instinct in her whispered danger. But something deeper, something older, pushed her forward. She followed the sound, moving through the forest with careful steps. The trees parted slowly, revealing the edges of another small clearing. At its center, a young girl sat curled against a rock, her knees tucked to her chest, her face buried in her arms. She was shaking violently. Zuri hesitated. She knew what it felt like to be watched, to be approached while broken and vulnerable. So she stepped out into the light gently, making sure her presence wasn't threatening. "Are you hurt?" Zuri asked softly. The girl jerked upright, fear flooding her eyes. She stumbled backward so fast she fell onto her hands. Zuri raised both palms slowly to show she meant no harm. "It's all right," Zuri whispered. "I won't hurt you." The girl stared at her, chest heaving. Dirt streaked her face and her ankle was swollen. She looked like she had been running for hours. After a long moment, the girl's voice cracked out. Your hands? They're glowing." Zuri swallowed. She glanced down. Even in the dim light, her palms shimmered faintly. "I don't know exactly why," Zuri admitted. "But I promise you have nothing to fear." The girl's fear softened just a little. Enough for Zuri to step closer and kneel beside her. "What happened to you?" Zuri asked gently. The girl wiped her eyes with trembling fingers. "I was running from, I don't know what it was. Something in the forest. I heard footsteps behind me. And whispers." Zuri's blood chilled. She knew those whispers. Not the night watchers, no. Those voices were old, gentle, ancient. But there were other things in the forest. Things that followed the scent of fear. Zuri's eyes moved across the tree line. Nothing stirred. But the air felt heavier there, as if something lingered out of sight. She turned back to the girl and reached out her hand. "Come on. You're safe now." The girl stared at her hand for a long moment before finally placing her small fingers into Zuri's. The moment their skin touched, a spark, tiny but real, flickered between them. The girl gasped softly. That wasn't Zuri's power. That was the night acknowledging trust. She helped the girl to her feet and supported her weight. The girl leaned into her shakily. "Who are you?" the girl asked. "Zuri," she answered. The girl blinked, recognition flickering through her face. "People in the village said you were gone." Zuri's heart tightened. There it was, that familiar sting of being discarded and forgotten, replaced by rumors before the world even knew the truth. "They were wrong," Zuri said quietly. The girl nodded as if the answer made perfect sense. They began walking back toward the main clearing. The forest seemed calmer now, as though it recognized Zuri's presence. Even the early morning mist curled at her feet like it was greeting her. But when they stepped back into the moonlit clearing, the girl suddenly froze. "What's wrong?" Zuri asked. The girl pointed to Zuri's shadow. It was moving. Zuri's breath caught. Her shadow stretched behind her, bending slightly as if a second figure stood within it. One of the night watchers, silent, watchful, unseen by any eyes except those meant to witness. Zuri felt no fear, only certainty. The girl whispered, trembling, "It's following you." "No," Zuri corrected softly. "It's protecting us." The night stirred, confirming her words. The girl exhaled shakily, some of her fear melting into awe. Zuri helped her sit near the edge of the clearing and inspected her injured ankle. The swelling looked painful but not broken. "Why were you really out here alone?" Zuri asked. The girl looked down. "My father, he was drinking again. I ran before he got worse." Zuri's heart twisted. Pain recognized pain. Without thinking, she pressed her glowing palm gently to the girl's ankle. The girl gasped. The swelling didn't disappear. Zuri wasn't a healer, but the pain eased. Enough for her shoulders to relax. "How did you do that?" the girl breathed. "I don't know yet," Zuri admitted quietly. "The night gave me something. And I'm still learning what it means." The girl looked at her as though she were seeing a legend come alive. Zuri stood slowly, gazing at the sky as the last traces of darkness began to lift. She could feel the night withdrawing, reluctantly, respectfully. A promise lingered in the air, warm and powerful. You are not alone. You are chosen. You are seen. Zuri inhaled deeply. For the first time since Manla threw her out, she felt a direction. A purpose. The girl whispered, Zuri, can I stay with you? Just until sunrise? Zuri smiled gently. You can stay as long as you need. They sat together in the clearing, watching dawn stretch across the horizon. Zuri didn't notice it at first, but the ground beneath her glowed softly. And the night did not leave her. She stumbled through the darkness, bare feet scraping against gravel, the cold air biting her skin like punishment. The door her husband slammed behind her still echoed in her ears, that final, get out. It wasn't the first time he'd raised his voice, but tonight felt different. Tonight his voice cracked with something raw, something frightened. Lanra had always been cruel but never afraid. The moon hung low, almost watching her, its pale glow resting on her like a frail blanket. The village was silent. Even the dogs didn't bark. She wrapped her thin shawl tighter, stepping deeper into the pathway that led toward the abandoned fields. A place people avoided after sunset. A place whispered to be haunted. But she had nowhere else. As she walked, the wind shifted unnaturally, swirling around her ankles like it was trying to guide her. Shadows moved, not with threat but with purpose. She paused. Someone was watching. At first she thought it was just her imagination fueled by fear. But then she saw the faint outline, glittering, almost shimmering, like a shape carved out of the night itself. A sensation washed over her, calm, warm, ancient. A whisper drifted through the darkness. You were not thrown out, you were sent to us. Her breath caught. She turned but there was no one. Only the fields swaying gently though there was no wind. Another whisper, closer this time. He fears what he cannot control. Her heart hammered. How could the night know? How could it speak? Then she remembered. Her grandmother once told her that their bloodline carried something rare, an ability, sleeping in the spirit, awakened only when the world tried to break them. She never believed it, until now. The night air thickened, wrapping around her like a cloak. The stars above shimmered brighter, casting light where there shouldn't be any. Suddenly, a scene rippled in front of her, like a mirage carved from moonlight. She saw her husband inside the house pacing back and forth, muttering nervously. His hands trembled. Sweat rolled down his forehead though the night was cold. He wasn't celebrating throwing her out. He was terrified. Terrified of her. And of something she had never been told. The vision shifted. She saw herself as a child, eyes glowing faintly in the dark, a light her mother tried to hide. She saw her grandmother shielding her from shadows that moved with intention. She saw a prophecy whispered over her cradle. When she is wronged unjustly, the night will rise with her. The visions faded, and the field fell silent once more. Her knees weakened, not from fear but realization. The night hadn't come to frighten her. It had come to claim her. A soft voice, this time from behind her, spoke with certainty, like a guardian who had watched her entire life. Child of dusk, you are awakening. She didn't scream. Didn't run. Instead, she let the darkness settle around her like it recognized her, like it had always been part of her. She inhaled deeply and the night inhaled with her. She exhaled and shadows bent at her feet. Lanra hadn't thrown her out because he hated her. He had thrown her out because he knew this moment was coming. And he couldn't stop it. For the first time in her life she felt no fear, only strength, deep and ancient, rising in her veins like a tide. She looked toward her home in the distance. Lanra thought he had abandoned her. But tonight, the night had revealed the truth. He was afraid of what she would become. As she stood in the open field, wrapped in the quiet pulse of the night, the truth settled over her like a slow-moving storm, heavy, unstoppable, and electric. Her husband, Lanra, the man who had spent years breaking her spirit with sharp words and cold silences, had not thrown her out because of power, but because of panic. A panic rooted in something much older than their marriage. She started walking again, guided not by fear but by instinct. The night followed her like a guardian, shadows shifting to clear her path, moonlight softening the ground beneath her feet. Every breath she took felt deeper, fuller, as if the night air was strengthening her from the inside out. Her mind replayed the vision she saw earlier, Lanra pacing in terror, his hands trembling, his eyes darting to corners she couldn't see. What did he know? What had he been hiding? The wind brushed her shoulder like a reassuring hand. You will see. Her heartbeat steadied. She followed the sound of rustling leaves until she reached the giant Irako tree at the edge of the abandoned fields. The story said the tree was cursed, that spirits rested inside its bark. But the night around her hummed gently, inviting, protective. As she approached, the shadows beneath the tree parted like curtains. And there, lying in the exposed roots, was a wooden chest. Ancient. Wrapped in fabric decorated with symbols she had never learned but somehow recognized. Her breath caught in her throat. She knelt, trembling, not with fear but with the weight of destiny. The moment her fingers brushed the chest, the night shifted. A hush fell across the fields. A whisper, soft, deep, familiar, echoed inside her mind. He hid what belonged to you. Her pulse quickened. She opened the chest. Inside was a bundle of folded cloth, and beneath it, a sealed letter, worn and cracked from age. The handwriting on it froze her breath. Her grandmother's. Her hands shook as she tore the seal and unfolded the letter. The wind stilled, letting her read. My child of the night skies. If this letter reaches you, your darkness has awakened. You are born of a long line of night-bearers, women who see through shadows, who hear the truth that others bury, who glow brightest when the world tries to silence them. Guard your gift, for many will fear it, including those closest to you. Her vision blurred with tears. Night-bearer. A word she had never heard, yet felt carved into her bones. She kept reading. The man you marry will try to hide who you are. He will try to dim your path. Not because you are weak, but because he has been warned of what power you carry. She sucked in a sharp breath. Lanra had known all along. The letter went on. If he casts you out, do not despair. It means the moment of truth has come. The night will reveal what he fears most. Go to the Irako tree. There you will find what he tried to bury. Her throat tightened. She set the letter down and lifted the folded cloth. Inside was a small pendant, black stone, glowing faintly like a captured piece of the night sky. The moment she touched it, warmth spread through her palm, rising to her chest and settling in her heart. The night around her deepened, humming, alive. Suddenly, another vision burst open before her eyes. Lanra stood in their home, clutching a second letter, one written by her grandmother as well, his eyes wide with fear as he read the prophecy that spoke of her awakening. The vision showed his hands shaking as he whispered, "She cannot stay. She awakens. I cannot control what she becomes." Her stomach twisted. Not anger. Not sorrow. Something colder. Sharper. Understanding. Lanra had not married her out of love. He had married her to keep her hidden. To keep her power dormant. To make sure the prophecy never came to pass. The vision faded. The night grew still. She stared at the pendant glowing in her palm, feeling the truth settle into her bones. Lanra wasn't afraid of her leaving. He was afraid she would rise. That she would remember who she truly was. That she would become the woman her grandmother had foreseen. A night-bearer. Slowly she placed the pendant around her neck. It pulsed once, warm and steady, like the heartbeat of the night itself. Her eyes lifted. The darkness no longer felt empty. It thrummed with life, with purpose, with waiting. A soft whisper drifted through the still air. Now you understand. She did. Every cruel word Lanra had spoken. Every time he dimmed her dreams. Every moment he tried to make her feel small. It had never been about her weakness. It had always been about her strength. And now, the night itself stood with her. She rose slowly, her shawl fluttering in the breeze, her shadow stretching behind her like wings. Lanra's fear was no longer her burden. It was her power. She turned back toward the village, toward the truth she would now face with eyes fully open. Tonight, the darkness had become her greatest ally. And she was no longer the woman he threw out. She was the woman he had tried and failed to keep buried. She walked back toward the village, her feet sinking softly into the earth as if the ground itself was cushioning her steps. The pendant against her chest pulsed gently, matching the rhythm of her heartbeat. Every breath she took felt full, alive, like the air was feeding strength into her lungs. The night no longer followed her. It walked with her. As she approached the outskirts of the village, strange things began to happen, small at first, then undeniable. The street lamps flickered when she passed. Shadows shifted, bending away from her like bowing figures. The wind curled gently around her shoulders, lifting the edge of her shawl as if escorting her forward. She didn't feel fear. Only purpose. For the first time in her life, she walked without lowering her eyes. The weight that had clung to her for years, Lanra's insults, his belittling, his control, seemed to crumble behind her like a shed skin. A group of villagers fetching water paused as she stepped into the lamplight. Their buckets rattled. One woman gasped, dropping hers entirely. "Mama Aden," the woman whispered. Is that her? They had all seen Lanra throw her out. Some had watched from windows. Some had pretended not to look. Others had murmured, "What did she do this time?" But now, she carried the night around her like a second skin. The air shimmered faintly as though moonlight was woven into her shadow. The villagers stepped aside without a word, letting her pass. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The night spoke for her, cool, strong, and silent. As she crossed the center of the village, an old man sitting beneath a broken lantern leaned forward, squinting. "Child?" he murmured, voice trembling. "Your grandmother walked like that, with the night at her back." She paused. Her breath caught. He nodded slowly, recognizing what others couldn't. "She had the gift," he continued. "The seeing. The knowing." And when she was angry, his eyes flicked to the trembling lantern. The night trembled with her. A shiver ran down her spine, not from fear but from confirmation. She bowed her head respectfully. The old man placed a shaking hand on his chest and whispered, "Your time has come." She continued walking. The closer she came to her home, the house where Lanra was surely pacing, sweating, wondering if she was dead or begging for help, the stronger the air around her became. The shadows turned sharp. The breeze stiffened. The pendant glowed hotter, the stone pulsing like a tiny star. And then, she reached the doorway. The lights inside flickered wildly. Lanra's voice carried through the shutters, angry, frantic, cracking under pressure. "No, no, it cannot happen, she cannot, no, she cannot." She pushed the door open. Lanra spun toward her. His face drained of color. For a long moment neither spoke. Her shawl moved even though there was no wind inside the room. The night pressed against the walls like something living, breathing, aware. He took a step back. Another. He looked at her the way a man looks at a storm rolling toward him, one he knows he caused but cannot control. "You," he whispered. "You weren't supposed to come back." She raised her chin, eyes steady. "I was never yours to control." The shadows behind her thickened, wrapping the doorway like a crown. The pendant around her neck glowed brighter, painting her skin with soft silver light. Lanra swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. He stammered. "I only did what the letter said. Your grandmother warned me. She said if you awakened, that you would lose your grip on me," she cut in, voice steady. He winced. She stepped inside, each footstep echoing like soft thunder. "You threw me out," she said quietly, "because you feared what I would become." Lanra's lips trembled. I was trying to prevent the prophecy." She gave a slow, cold smile. "And in doing so you fulfilled it." The lantern on the table flickered violently. A gust of wind blew through the closed windows. The night wrapped around her shoulders like a cloak. Lanra staggered back, staring at her as though she were no longer human, but something older, something foretold. She walked past him without another glance and opened the window. Cool night air swept in, circling her like an embrace. Then she spoke, soft but powerful. "You feared the darkness in me. But the darkness was never meant to break me." She turned, eyes glowing faintly. "It was meant to reveal me." Lanra fell silent. The night behind her pulsed gently, waiting. And she understood. This was only the beginning of her rise. The moment she stepped fully into the house, something shifted, subtle at first, then sharp enough for even Lanra to feel. The shadows in the corners began to move, not like tricks of the eye, but like restless memories waking from a long sleep. She didn't touch anything. She didn't need to. The night touched everything for her. Lanra's breath hitched as the air thickened, pressing against his chest. He stumbled backward, knocking over a stool, but the sound barely echoed, almost as if the darkness swallowed the noise before it could spread. She raised her eyes slowly, calmly, letting the room settle into silence. And then it began. The first secret slithered out of the dark like smoke. A whisper formed near the back wall, a memory, fragile and trembling. It shaped itself into Lanra's own voice. "If she ever learns the truth, I'm finished." Lanra flinched so violently he crashed into the table. No, stop. You don't know what you're doing." But she wasn't doing anything. The night was. Another whisper drifted out, painting itself into the air in a thin ribbon of shadow. "Take her away. Toss her out. The prophecy cannot unfold." Her jaw tightened, not in fury but in cold understanding. Lanra tried to grab the shadow, ridiculous, desperate, but his hand passed through it, and the air hissed around him as if offended by his touch. "You don't understand," he cried. "Your grandmother, she said if you awakened, everything would turn against me." The shadows pulsed angrily. She took a step forward, and the darkness followed like loyal wolves at her heels. "Everything is turning against you," she said softly, "because of what you've done. Not because of who I am." Lanra backed toward the doorway, but the shadows closed it shut before he reached it. The wood groaned as if the night itself held it in place. More secrets spilled out, dozens, coating the walls, circling him like ghosts. The time he lied to her about selling her grandmother's land. The time he hid letters addressed to her. The time he stole the last gift her grandmother left, a small box sealed with wax, meant for the day she turned 21. The shadows cracked open the floor beneath a chair, revealing the box. Her breath caught. Lanra shook his head wildly. "It wasn't mine to keep, I had to prevent your awakening." "You had to enslave me," she corrected. "Not protect me." Lightning flickered outside, though no storm had been forecast. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and heavy, like the sky itself was growling. The night moved over her shoulders, dim but steady, no anger, just truth. As she knelt to pick up the sealed box, the pendant at her chest glowed bright, recognizing it. A faint warmth pulsed through her fingers. The wax seal cracked open on its own. Inside was a small strip of cloth, deep indigo, embroidered in silver thread. A pattern she recognized immediately. Her grandmother's symbol. A mark of the Night Keepers. Her throat tightened. Lanra collapsed to the floor, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't want to lose control," he whispered. "I didn't want you to surpass me. I didn't want—" his voice cracked. "I didn't want the village to see that you were more than me." For the first time she saw him clearly, not as a husband, not as a tormentor, but as a man eaten alive by insecurity. The shadows around him twisted, revealing a final truth, one he had never spoken aloud. "If she becomes what she's meant to be, I'll be nothing." The words sliced through the house like a cold blade. She closed the box gently. "You were already nothing," she said quietly, "the moment you tried to break me." Lanra shook his head violently, tears streaking down his face. "Please, stop the shadows. I can't breathe." "They aren't punishing you," she said. "They're revealing you." As she spoke, the darkness shifted again, not cruelly but purposefully. It lifted the hidden stacks of coins he kept under the floorboards, money he told her they didn't have. It dragged out the dresses he claimed she didn't deserve. It uncovered burnt letters he never allowed her to read, letters from people searching for her, calling her by the name her grandmother wanted her to reclaim. The house groaned under the weight of truth. Lanterns flickered so violently that glass cracked. Lanra tried to crawl away from the swarm of memories, but every direction he turned, the darkness followed, whispering, echoing, replaying. She didn't raise a hand. She didn't command anything. The night simply knew. It had watched him belittle her. It had listened to her cry behind closed doors. It had witnessed everything he thought no one would ever see. Now it was making him watch it. She finally stepped closer, calm, steady, powerful. The shadows parted for her, bowing away from her path. She stood over Lanra, who trembled uncontrollably, his face pale, his eyes swollen from tears. He could barely lift his gaze. "Why won't it stop?" he whispered. "Because the night reveals what daylight hides," she answered. The pendant glowed once more, steady and bright. "And you," she said, "built your entire life in the dark." The room fell into a deep, heavy silence. Lanra sobbed quietly, broken. Then the night pulled back, not retreating, not weakening, but waiting. Waiting for her next step. Because the night no longer cared about Lanra. It cared about her. And for the first time she realized, the shadows weren't showing his secrets just to punish him. They were showing her who she truly was. The moment the night released its grip on Lanra, the house seemed to breathe again, but it was not a calm breath. It was the shuddering inhale of a structure realizing its time had come. The rafters groaned. Dust trickled down. The lamps flickered as though bowing in fear. She stood in the center of the room, silent, steady, and entirely transformed. And the night stood with her. What happened next was not rage. Not vengeance. Not even justice. It was truth given form. The house had always observed. It had heard every shout Lanra hurled at her. It had felt every slam of his fist against the table. It had watched her curl into corners and wipe her tears in secret. Now that she was awakened, the house remembered everything. Would bet. Windows rattled. The floorboards shifted beneath her feet, not violently, almost reverently. As if the home itself recognized the Nightkeeper, blood pulsing through her veins. Lanra struggled to his feet, his breath shallow, panic written across his face. "Make it stop. This is my house." "No," she said quietly. This house belonged to truth long before it belonged to you. The words rippled through the beams. The lantern nearest to Lanra burst, sending sparks upward. He yelped and stumbled back. She didn't move. The night wrapped her like a cloak, embracing her with calm certainty. Lanra tried to regain control, pointing at her with a shaking finger. This is witchcraft. You're twisting everything. It's you making the house do this. No, she replied, her voice soft and unervingly steady. You made the house do this. Every cruelty left a mark. Now the marks speak. Thunder cracked outside, loud, deep, like the sky splitting in half. The walls began to shift, showing faint outlines, dark, blurred shapes at first, then clearer. Scenes. Memories. Her memories. The corner where she sat in the dark after he locked her out for hours. The back door where he threw her clothes after a fight. The kitchen where she ate in silence while he laughed with his friends about a wife who dreams too much. Every painful moment replayed like a living portrait carved into the walls. Lanra screamed and slapped at the images as if he could erase them. But the more he tried, the clearer they became. He backed away from the memories, bumping into the dining table. As he grabbed the edge, it began to tremble, almost as if rejecting his touch. The plates rattled, rising slightly off the surface before settling back down in a circle, arranged around her instead of him. The house was choosing sides. The night deepened, shadows massing behind her like a great spirit gathering strength. The air around her shimmered faintly with silvery pulses, as though unseen hands drummed softly in celebration of her awakening. Lanra swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his face. You're going to destroy me. I don't need to destroy you, she said. You've done that yourself. The words struck harder than any storm. Outside, the wind rose into a howl. The trees bent violently as if bowing toward the house. The ground itself shook for a heartbeat. Then something strange happened. The entire house fell silent, too silent. The night pulled back, leaving a hollow stillness, like everything was holding its breath. And then, rising from the floorboards, slipping down from the ceiling beams, the secrets he had buried came crawling out. Not just the memories, not just the whispers, but the evidence. A hidden compartment under the stairs broke open. Stacks of money he stole from the community fund. Letters from debt collectors he hid behind her back. A bracelet she thought she lost, actually pawned and repurchased, used as an excuse to shame her for being careless. Lanra collapsed again, staring at the items in horror. Please, stop, people will know. People should know, she replied. The wind outside roared as if agreeing. But the house was not finished. The floorboards swelled, lifting a final object. A wrapped bundle, small, carefully tied. Her heartbeat slowed. Her grandmother's bracelet. The real one. Not the pawned copy. He had hidden it from her for years. When she reached for it, the shadows parted fully, almost bending in a gesture of respect. The silver thread around the bracelet glowed as her fingers brushed it. Lanra trembled. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want you to awaken. Your grandmother warned me. She said if you found your purpose, I would no longer be able to control. That was the point, she interrupted. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face, calm, fearless, ancient. Lanra sank back as if struck. The night surged forward, filling the cracks in the walls, spreading across the ceiling in rippling layers of shadow. Then, slowly the house began to glow, from the inside, from within its very foundation. Not with fire. Not with destruction. With truth. The walls became transparent, showing scenes of her past, her pain, her strength, visible to the entire outside world. Anyone passing by could see Lanra's cruelty illuminated like a lantern in the dark. Lanra screamed, covering his eyes. Close them. Close them. They're not eyes, she whispered. They're witnesses. He collapsed fully, sobbing. The night wrapped around her one final time, lifting her chin slightly, affirming her power. When she spoke next, the house itself seemed to listen. This home will not fall because of me, she said calmly. It will fall because you built it on fear. The roof groaned loudly. Dust dropped like soft rain. A long crack split the floor between them. Lanra scrambled away as the night drew back, returning the house to its natural stillness. But the damage was already done. The truth had been released. The house would never be his again. And as she walked toward the door, the shadows followed her. Not to threaten, but to guard. For she no longer belonged to a home of pain. She belonged to the night. And the night had claimed her destiny. Word of the house trembling spread quickly, carried by those who saw flickering lights through the windows or heard strange sounds echoing into the night. By morning the village buzzed with whispers. Mothers clutched their children closer. Farmers paused mid-step in the fields. Everyone spoke in low tones, "She has awakened." Those who had doubted the girl, the one thrown out at midnight, felt a shiver run down their spines. Even the bravest men hesitated as they walked past her home. The air seemed to hum with anticipation, almost as if it carried the heartbeat of the night itself. She did not hide. She walked calmly through the village streets, her presence quiet yet commanding. Shadows followed her steps, bending around her like protective waves. The villagers noticed that the animals paused to watch her. Cows lifted their heads from grazing, dogs stopped barking, and birds scattered only after she had passed. Nature itself seemed to recognize the shift. Lanra was forced to follow her, shuffling behind, broken and fearful. Every glance the villagers gave him was laced with judgment, though no one spoke directly. They only needed to look at him to understand. Cruelty cannot hide when truth walks openly. Children ran alongside her, curious and unafraid. One small boy tugged at her robe and whispered, "Are you the one the shadows protect?" She smiled faintly, touching his hair, and replied, "The shadows only serve truth, little one. They serve no one else." Meanwhile, the whispers of the night began to ripple through the village, carrying stories of what had happened. The house that once symbolized fear, control, and secrecy was now a beacon of awakening. Windows were left open so everyone could see that the house, though still standing, belonged to no tyrant. It belonged to truth itself. The blacksmith, who had always boasted of his courage, avoided her gaze entirely. He had laughed when she was thrown out. He had whispered insults behind his closed door. Now he felt the weight of every word he had spoken. Each villager, in their own way, began to understand. Fear is the easiest way to command obedience, but truth cannot be contained. Lanra's voice quivered as he tried to speak to the villagers. She is still just a girl. This is illusion." A woman stepped forward, holding a bundle of fresh herbs in her hands, a silent offering to the girl who had survived the night. Her voice was firm, filled with quiet conviction. "Illusion or not, the night has spoken. And we see the truth now." Children began to chant softly, almost in prayer. "Nightkeeper, Nightkeeper, Nightkeeper." The name, once whispered in fear and skepticism, became a beacon of hope. Even those who had doubted her power began to recognize that she had become something far greater than any human tyrant. She had become a force that could not be denied, a guardian that the village needed whether they understood it or not. Lanra fell to his knees in the center of the street, trembling violently. The villagers parted for him as he clutched at the dirt, eyes wide, voice broken. "Please, she is still my wife. She is mine. Don't let her take everything." She stopped a few paces away and looked down at him with calm authority. The night had sharpened her voice, strengthened her will, and revealed her purpose. She did not raise her hand. She did not summon fire or shadow. She simply spoke, letting the weight of her words carry the judgment. "You chose cruelty. You chose fear. And now the world sees what you cannot undo." The shadows at her feet stirred, moving toward him in slow, deliberate waves. They did not strike. They merely stretched around him, pressing him into the truth of his own actions. Every lie he had whispered, every act of betrayal, every manipulation, exposed, undeniable, and impossible to escape. Villagers gathered, silent, yet fully aware. They did not intervene, nor did they need to. The night itself had become the judge, and she, the girl who had been thrown out, was its voice. Lanra collapsed fully, shivering as if the weight of the entire village, the night, and every hidden truth pressed down on him. The man who had once wielded power through fear now had none. He was small, broken, and entirely exposed. Meanwhile, she lifted her head. Her eyes scanned the faces of the people who had doubted her, those who had laughed, those who had ignored her suffering. The shadows receded slightly, leaving her standing bathed in the pale morning light, calm and luminous. The villagers could finally breathe. They could finally see. Her lips curved in a faint, serene smile. She whispered, not to him, not to anyone in particular, but to the night itself. "The night has witnessed. The shadows have spoken. The truth will always rise." And in that moment the village understood fully. She was no longer just the girl who had been thrown out at midnight. She was the Nightkeeper, the witness, the force that no cruelty could contain. And the world, now awake, would never forget her name. By the time the sun rose fully over the village, the world had changed. The streets that once echoed with whispers of gossip and fear now carried a new sound, a reverent quiet, punctuated by the soft footsteps of those who had come to witness the girl who had returned stronger than any night. She moved through the village slowly, deliberately. Her hair, damp from the lingering mist of dawn, clung to her shoulders and her eyes held a calm fire. Every step left a faint shimmer, almost imperceptible, as if the night itself had imbued her with the echo of its power. People stopped to stare, their hearts pounding with awe and trepidation. Mothers shielded their children, yet their eyes betrayed a longing for hope. Farmers paused mid-plow, realizing that they were witnessing more than just a human, they were witnessing destiny. Lanra remained collapsed in the central square, humbled and trembling. His voice, once commanding and filled with authority, was now cracked and small. "Please, listen, she is still mine." But she had no need for him now. The girl who had been thrown into the dark, abandoned and broken, had become the embodiment of the truth he had spent a lifetime trying to hide. She knelt briefly, touching the cracked cobblestones, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath her. The stones themselves seemed to recognize her, vibrating faintly under her fingertips, resonating with the story of her survival. The villagers began to gather around her, drawn not by fear but by reverence. They whispered her name with awe, "Night Keeper! Night Keeper!" Children repeated it with wide-eyed wonder, the sound almost musical in the morning air. Even the elders, who had once scoffed at her quiet presence, now bowed their heads in respect, acknowledging that the girl who had been beaten, thrown out, and humiliated had risen into something far greater than any human authority. Lanra attempted to rise, but the shadows still lingered, circling him in silent judgment. They did not strike, they merely held him in place, pressing him into the weight of his own actions. Every lie, every act of cruelty, every manipulation he had inflicted on her, made tangible in the shifting darkness that obeyed her command. He could feel them all, impossible to deny. She walked past him, the shadows parting at her feet like obedient waves. Her gaze swept over the village, over the faces that had doubted her, over the streets where she had once feared to tread. Her voice, calm and unyielding, cut through the morning air. "The night bears witness. The shadows remember. Every cruelty, every betrayal, every lie you thought hidden, it all rises to meet the light." A hush fell over the crowd. Even the birds in the trees paused, their wings still. The wind softened, carrying her words across the fields, across rooftops, and into the ears of those who had not been present. Her message was simple but powerful. No act of injustice can remain buried forever. Lanra fell to his knees, sobbing openly, his face pressed into the cobblestones. "Forgive me. I didn't know. I didn't see." She did not answer him. Forgiveness was not hers to grant, not yet. Her purpose was greater than him. She was not merely a girl wronged. She was the Night Keeper, the guardian of truth, the living voice for all who had been silenced. The villagers watched as she moved toward the edge of the village square. As she walked, the mist rising from the ground seemed to bend toward her, forming shapes, soft, glowing images of her past suffering, now transformed into symbols of strength. The lamps in the square flickered in unison, casting light on the truths that had long been ignored. Children stepped closer, emboldened by her presence. "Will you teach us?" one asked, his voice trembling. She looked down at them, her eyes gentle yet piercing. "I will teach you to hear the night, to see what others fear, to hold truth as your shield and your sword." The wind picked up again, carrying the faint scent of rain and the distant sound of rustling leaves. The village itself seemed to sigh in relief, as if recognizing that the weight of fear and cruelty had finally lifted. The buildings, once heavy with the shadows of human cruelty, now felt light, infused with a sense of renewal. Lanra remained on the ground, utterly defeated but no longer relevant. His power had evaporated the moment she embraced her destiny. The villagers understood this instinctively. The girl who had been thrown out at midnight was no longer defined by her suffering. She was defined by her purpose, her strength, and the way she had transformed every act of cruelty into a stepping stone for justice. She raised her hand, palm glowing faintly as the first light of day touched it. "Remember this," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the village. "Those who seek to silence others will be heard in ways they cannot imagine. The night will speak. The shadows will witness. And truth will always rise." From that day forward she became more than just a girl who survived. She became a guardian, a teacher, a symbol. Children told stories of the Night Keeper. Travelers left offerings at the village gates. Her name was spoken not in fear but in hope. And as she walked through the village, shadows bending gently toward her, the people understood fully. She had turned her suffering into strength, her pain into purpose, and her exile into destiny. They had beaten her. They had thrown her out. They had tried to silence her. But the night revealed her fear, and in its darkness she became the light the world needed. Her name would never be forgotten.